Hey everyone, good morning. Thanks for joining us on Saturday morning. So today for our talk, we have Prateek with us. He's gonna walk us through the Compose, like if you have an existing app and if you want to convert it to Compose, then how to go about it. So he'll walk us through that. So Compose is like currently trending in Android developer community. Like everybody's talking about Compose. So if you have not checked it out, like it's a declarative way of writing UI. It's gonna completely change how we write Android app UIs, and it's still in beta. So it's good time to check out and play around with it. So you're like at least aware of the philosophy. It's very different, like the way we write XML and the way we are gonna write Compose. So we'll also drop a link to Android's Compose pathway course in the description below, so you can check that out, and that will help you getting in a hang of like how to write UI and how to maintain states of your UI components and everything. And today, anyway, Prateek is also gonna walk us through how to convert your existing apps UI. And if you have any questions during the talk, just drop it in the comment box below. We can highlight those during end of the session, and Prateek can help you understand your help you clarify your doubts and understand the concepts. So without any further ado, let me add Prateek to the stream. Hey, hello. Good morning.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, cool. Let me just turn down the volume. Is this better?
Yeah, it's good. Good.
Cool. Thanks for joining me for this session today. Before we get into the live coding, I just have like a couple of slides to get through. So let's get started with that.
Wait.
So what I'll do is if you can add my screen here, I'll just play the slides.
Yeah.
Cool. So this is going to be a hands-on session on refactoring an existing app to Jetpack Compose. Quick introduction about me. I'm Prateek. I'm a part of the mobile engineering team at Buffer. You can find me on Twitter at Hackatronics. Slight disclaimer. So the amount of Compose I'll cover is probably scratching the surface. It's just like 20% of the total API surface, but at the same time, it should cover 80% of the most common use cases that you might come across when building an app. So it should be enough to get you up to speed with the APIs. There are some ideal and like soft requirements. You should have like a working familiarity with Kotlin. You should have worked with MVVM architecture, but any sort of reactive architecture like MVI should also be fine. Some familiarity with architecture components, mainly the view model and live data, would come in handy. And then basic familiarity with some composables would also be an added benefit. But it's not a problem if you don't know Compose. I'll try to make it as introductory as possible. Cool. So what is Jetpack Compose? So this is like copy pasted from their website. So it's a modern UI toolkit for building native UIs. It simplifies and accelerates UI development, and you end up writing way less code and work with intuitive Kotlin APIs. But like in simple terms, for things like building a list, you no longer need like 100 lines to do it. You can do it in a much more idiomatic and expressive way like this. So before we get into the live coding, let's just jump through a couple of quick primers around Compose. First, UI state. So if you look at an XML-based UI, this is what our typical structure looks like. So we've got like our view model, which is typically the state owner. And then the activity or fragment observes the state. And then based on any change in the state, we manually call setter functions for updating our XML-based widgets. Now, this is a lot of manual work, and this dance to basically synchronize our XML UI with our state is quite error-prone as well. Declarative UI takes a different approach to this altogether, and it's much more simple. So anytime our state changes, our composable will basically re-emit itself, and it directly observes that state. And Compose internally will diff your UI tree to make sure that it's only re-invoking the composables that have changed. So it basically skips anything that has not changed since the last emission. Second part, modifiers. So modifiers basically determine the behavior, layout, and the visual appeal of your composable. But there's a quick gotcha there. you have to be aware about the order in which you apply the modifiers because it ends up impacting the way its final look. So if we take a look at building this graphic out, which is like a square of side 200 dp, and then we've got another hollow square inside at a margin of 24 dp, and then we have like a red circle. The like logical sequence in which you would think about building this would be something as follows, right? So you create a yellow square, you give it a modifier of size 200 dp and a background of yellow. Then you will add some padding for the internal square, and then do a border stroke there for 2 dips with a color white. And then finally, you would add another padding for the circle and give it a background red and clip the circle shape. But if you run this, the result will not be what you would have intended. You'll get a square here instead of a circle. And the reason is because the ordering in this case matters, and the way in which modifiers basically work is so top to bottom, a modifier basically applies an effect to a composable, and then it needs to be consumed by another modifier in order for that effect to be visible. So in this case, if you look at the background, the color red is applied, which is consumed by the clip modifier. But when the clip modifier actually clips the circle, nothing is actually consuming it, which is why you get the square instead of a circle. So a quick fix for that will be just flipping around the order. So you just clip the circle, and then the clipped circle will be consumed by the background modifier, which will be rendered accordingly. That's for the containers. So Compose ships with most of the common UI components that you might need when building UIs, like text, button, cards, and all of these components come out of the box with material theming and styling support. But the way in which we lay out these components is slightly different. So in XML, we lay things out on the z-axis using frame layout. For anything that we need to do on the X or Y axis, we typically use a linear layout. And then for laying things out relatively, we use a constraint layout. On Compose, things change slightly. So for stacking things on top of each other, we use a box. For a horizontal alignment, we use a row. And for a vertical alignment, we use columns. There's a few nuances to how these containers work, and I'll get to that in the live coding, right? So having said that, we can now get started building the app. You'll be able to find the project at this link later after the live stream. So let's get started. So if you can see my screen and tell me if the font is good, I'll go ahead. Brajesh, is the font good?
Yeah, you can increase a bit.
Okay.
Maybe a couple of steps.
How about now?
Yeah, this works.
Cool. So I'll just pause the video and just set up the phone to share the app with you. So cool. So let's get started with the app. I'll first give you like a quick walkthrough. So this is the app in its current form. It's basically 2 screens. There's a popular movies section and there's a favorite section, and you can go inside of a movie, mark it as favorite, and it'll show up in the favorite section. So you can remove it from there. Now in its current form, it's not particularly pretty, but maybe we can take a look at cleaning this up and making it a little nicer once we move this over to Compose. So let's take a look at the project at this point. So we've got like 2 fragments here. So this is the popular movies fragment, and the favorite fragment is also the same. It's just that the data source is different. So it's just using the standard setup. We've got view binding, we've got view models, and we are essentially observing the live data from the view model to render out the list, right? And we've got navigation components to basically navigate from the list screen to the detail screen. So if you look at one of the, let's say, view models, so popular, right? What it does is when it's initialized, it fetches things from the repository, and the repository structure is also fairly straightforward. So it fetches the movies from the API, caches it, and then presents it from the cache. Now, I'm not doing anything fancy here in terms of error handling or testing as such, just to keep the scope of this project small. So let's get started building this UI. So I'll just close all of these files. And one of the ideas behind Compose is that you build your layouts from bottom up. So that means you build out the smallest component first, and then use those components to compose your screen. You see where the naming comes from, right? So what we'll do is we'll first try to build this list item here, right? So I've got a package here, and I'll create a new file. Let's call this movie card. And this is going to be a composable. Movie card that takes in a movie for now. We'll also generate a preview for this. So preview composable fun movie card preview. And inside of the preview, we'll just invoke this movie card component. And I've got a fake data factory that just hard codes some values and builds a movie. So we'll use this for the preview here. Cool. So now if you look at this list item, it's basically built out of 3 components. So on the lowermost side, we have the image, and then we have this gradient scrim, this blackish gradient scrim that will just make the text a little visible. And then on top of the text, we have these 3 widgets, which is like a text view, 2 text views, and then a rating component. So let's try to figure out how to build this first, right? So first up, we want to have some sort of a container, right? So in order to, as I had shown in the slides, in order to build a vertical stack, we use a box, right? So a box will accept a modifier. So we want this box's width to be the screen width. So we'll give it a modifier of fill max width. Okay. Now we want to constrain its height. So we'll give it a height of, let's say, 200 dp. And the dp is basically a property that's already defined on float as an extension. So you don't need to worry about converting things. And then inside of this box, we'll have, let's write it down. So we'll have the background, and then we'll have the scrim, and then we'll have the content, which is basically the title, the info, and the rating. Let's start off with the background. So the movie comes with a URL for loading the image, but like if you look at the image component that comes with Compose, it doesn't natively support loading images from from a URL. So what I've done is I've added the Accompanist library by Chris Paynes that gives us access to the coil image. So coil image is basically able to take a URL. So I give it a backdrop URL. Now I want to define a couple of properties for this, right? So first let's remove this. And what we want this this image to do is, first of all, it needs to be, let's define like a content scale so that this fills the entire available space. So that'll be a content scale crop. And then we'll use, I think it's not visible properly. Let me just reduce the size here. Yeah. And then what we'll do is we'll use the request builder property within coil to essentially enable a crossfade here. So what this will do is, as and when the image loads, it'll crossfade in. Now, the reason why this is not working is because image needs a content description. So we'll simply use the movie title itself as the content description for this image for accessibility purposes. And let's also give this a modifier of fill max size. So this will basically take up the entire width and height of its parent now, so that it's visible, in the available space allotted to it here. Cool. So we've done the background. Now let's take care of the scrim. So if I show you the Declarative Ui item, you can see that the scrim is essentially like a drawable that has a gradient via an XML drawable here. But again, right at this point in time, XML drawables are not supported apart from like vector assets as such. So what we'll do is we'll simply create a column here, which is like a vertical linear layout, and we'll use this to basically define the scrim for this card. So this will take a modifier of fill max size because we wanted to match the parent on both X and Y. We will then give this background, and the background here would be a vertical gradient. Now, if you look at what a vertical gradient takes, it takes like a list of colors, and it takes a start coordinate and an end coordinate. So basically, you want the scrim to go from here to somewhere in the middle, roughly in the ballpark of the middle of this view. So let's first give it the colors. So list of, so there'll be a color dot transparent and then color dot black. Right? Because if you look at it here, it basically is darker on the bottom, and then as it goes up, it gets lighter. So that, and then we have the start coordinate. So start Y, we will start at 0 and then end it roughly at, let's say, 500F. Right? The preview is a little finicky, so it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. What I have found what I found reliable is at times just closing the file and reopening it should re-render this movie card, right? Yeah. Anyways, we'll deploy it later to check it out if this works or not. Cool. Next up, we want the content of this particular card. So the content is again a column which has two text components and then a rating bar. So let's first define a column. And this column will basically be a fill max width because we wanted to span the entire width of the parent. So fill max width. And then if you look at it here, it is at an offset from the top and the left side. So we'll give this a padding, and padding has a couple of variations. So you can either define like a horizontal vertical padding or a padding on all directions, or specifically apply padding on either of the four sides. So now it started showing up. So let's just reduce the size a bit. Right, cool. So we want the padding top to be around 32 dp, not 340. Yeah, and then on the start around 16 dp. Cool. And now we'll get started with the content here. So first we'll add a text here. So text composable basically accepts text. Yeah. Why is this? Cool. So the text will be the movie title. So movie dot title. And then what we want to do is, if you look at this screen, right, there are some movies that are like exceeding the width of the screen. So we want to somehow wrap it. So first of all, let's give this a max line of 1, and then we want it to wrap. So we want to give it like an overflow modifier, overflow property of ellipse size. So anytime it goes beyond the recommended width, it will ellipsize the end. We also want to align this to the start. So text align is going to be text align.start. And then for now, let's just hard code and give it a color of white so things are visible. Oops. Cool. And this is going to be a bold. So if you look at the cards here, they're a little bold. So let's give it a font weight of font weight.bold, and then a font size of roughly 24 SP. And this is also an extension, so let's import this. Cool. So let's try to build this and see if this renders out. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and just duplicate this text composable here. for the movie info, and we'll change a couple of properties for it. So this will be movie info. This does not need a max lines. We also don't need an overflow or a bold, and this can be like 18 SP. So let's build and refresh this again. I'll just close this, and we can maybe deploy it later on. So after these two, we have like a rating card component. And so Compose basically doesn't come natively with a rating card component. So this is like a good enough opportunity to show how we can build a custom composable here. Cool. So we can, yeah, okay, cool. So this showed up. So what we'll do is we'll build a rating card component. So it's called rating bar, and we'll pass in the movie.rating to it, right? Let's create a new composable. And what we'll do is we'll also generate a preview for this. So preview add composable on rating. And let's give it like a rating of 3.5F to start off. So the first part of this rating component is this text, which actually shows the rating. So and then if you notice the rating bar in its entirety, this is like a horizontal linear layout of a text, and then a star, and then a star, and so on, right? So what we'll do is we need to horizontally lay things out. So for that, we'll use a row. And now this row will need to be at a padding of like 8 from the top. We'll also add the paddings to the text because right now it's hugging each other a lot. So let's give it a padding of top 8 dp. And then here we'll have a text component. We can basically copy this text component from here and change a couple of the properties. So let's give it a rating.toString. Does not need the max line overflow property. Color will still be white, font will still be bold, but the size will be around 32 dp. Let's try to build this now. So once the rating text is done, we need to handle how the stars will look like. So we'll basically have to handle the logic of rendering the stars in their form. So if you look at this movie, right, so it has a rating of 3.6, right? And so what that basically means is the first 3 stars are full, and then since the next rating is in the range of 0.5 to 0.9, that's the reason why it is half filled, and then the last one is completely unfilled. So let's build that out. Now again, the stars are also like a row, so I'll go ahead and build those as a row. So I'll create a row, and so first we need like a range for this to loop over. So this is a 5-star range, so I'll create a range here. So val range is equal to 1 through 5, right? Now I'll loop through that range. So it'll be a range.toList.for each. And so for this value, what we want to produce is a rating item. So this will take the value and the rating, and based on where the value falls within that rating, it will generate the star in like either filled or half filled or unfilled. So let's create that now, right? So for us to be able to determine what this middle star will be, whether or not it will be fully filled or half filled, we need to get a hold of the fraction and the whole number from this rating, and then determine if the fraction falls within that range. So what we can do is we can split the rating into a fraction and a whole. So let's call it whole, and fraction is equal to rating.split to whole and fraction. Now this is like an extension function that I had built to just split out the rating, and which returns a pair, which is what I'm receiving here. So now what we want to do is we will be emitting an icon here. And an icon takes an image vector, a content description, and also a tint, which will determine the color of the icon. So for the icon, we will need first the image vector. So let's assign it an image vector. So image vector is equal to, so if our value is, so value dot to float, yeah, if our value is equal to whole plus 1, which means, like, in a case of 3.6, if our value is the fourth star here, which is the 4 in this range, the whole plus 1, and if the fraction is in the range of 0.5 to 0.9, then in that case, what we want to do is emit an icon dot star, icon dot default, icons dot default dot star half, right? Because why isn't this importing? Okay, we need an else clause, or else we need the icons dot default dot star, right? So let me just quickly explain what I did here. So let's import this. Yeah. So if in the fourth value, if the rating falls between 0.5 and 0.9, then that would mean that our star needs to be half filled. Else it'll be just fully filled, which is like, the 3 stars before it or the next star that comes after. Similarly, for the color, we'll have like a val color, and this will also be dependent on the values here. So if our value is less than or equal to the whole, right? So the whole number is basically, in this case, 3.6. So the whole number is 3.0. So anything between 1 to 3 will be fully filled. Or if our value dot to float, basically the condition above, we can basically copy this out, right? If our value falls in here, right? So if this is the case, then we want the star to be yellow in color. So we'll do a color dot yellow. Else it will be a gray color. Color dot gray. Cool. So let's assign these now. So image vector will be image vector. Content description, we can keep it null for now. But don't do this. This is bad for accessibility. I'm just doing it because of the time factor here. And then for the tint, we can pass it the color, right? Cool. Now let's see how this looks, or if this works or not. Meanwhile, what we can do is go back to the text and give it some padding. So give this a modifier. Okay, Studio just found. Okay. So modifier equal to modifier dot padding top is equal to 8 dot dp. Since this is not working in the preview, what I'll do is I'll just directly deploy this. So movie card component, and let's run this. Okay, Studio seems to be taking a toll here. Let's see if we can quit a few things. Quick time.
Hey, Prateek.
Yeah.
There's some disturbance in your voice. Not the background noise. The mic has to be having some problem.
I guess it's Studio. Just give me a minute. Let me try to quit it and launch it again.
No, your voice,
Is this better?
it's more choppy.
Oh, let me see if my internet is crapping out. One sec. No, we are on the 5G. Anyway, let me quickly launch it first and then see what's going on. What's taking so much memory? Okay, let's try launching Studio again.
Yeah, sure.
Let me actually stop the screen share once and try it. Because my screen is lagging a lot. Okay, cool. Cool, it's launching now. Give me a minute. This is building right now, and this is hanging a lot. Yeah, I'll just share the screen once this is loaded.
Yeah.
If there are any questions till now, I can probably answer them right now while this is building again.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, just put it up like a Meetup. We can answer.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
That's fine. Seems to be some microphone issue because like there's a lot of disturbance while you're speaking.
Is this better? I don't think I have anything running for the mic, do I? No. I can switch back to my AirPods if you want. Like, this is an external mic. Still, if this is still choppy, just let me know and I'll switch to the AirPods mic in that case.
Yeah, just try it out once because it has
Okay,
some difference.
cool. Let me see. So, cam mic. How is this? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems
odd. Maybe it's the fan. Let me see if I can turn off the fan. Cool. Wow, this is hanging a lot. 1 second. Is it possible for us to reduce the stream quality?
yeah. Let me. You
The
can
screen
just.
share. Yeah, if you can reduce it to maybe like 720p or something, maybe that's why it's lagging so much.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Yeah. Meanwhile, your studio is starting. We have a few questions. Maybe we can start with those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Naman is asking
Is
if you
Jetpack
need an.
Compose? Is Jetpack Compose using normal studio? We have to install now. Right now, it's working on the Arctic Fox Canary probably that's the reason why it's so unstable. But yeah, it does, like, the tooling support isn't there in the regular studio right now.
Yeah.
In the first modifier example, you showed the ordering of modifier. Isn't that error could possibly be difficult to debug UI issues, or is there a better way of handling this? Good question. So it isn't error prone. It takes a while to get used to it. Once you understand the ordering in which these modifiers are applied, there's only like a certain combination that you can use to basically build a UI. In terms of like getting errors as such, it will probably be because of, like, the incorrect ordering, or the incorrect sizing as such, right? There shouldn't be an issue, like, once you get a hang of how the modifier, like, in a chain of modifiers, how the application process works, right? A good way to basically learn about this and get familiar, because it takes a while to actually for it to click for you. You can, like, try building like a box, and within that box try having like two more boxes and a circle, and then try to align it and apply a few modifiers and see what you were expecting, if that is the thing that you're getting as the result or not. And if it is not, then mostly it's the ordering issue. It's almost like RX, where you have to think about the operators and the order in which you apply them. Like, the when you are starting out, the most obvious way in which you would probably try to apply might not be the correct way to do so, right? So it takes a while to understand the application ordering, and then it's just fine. So Studio has loaded. Let me see if this is performant enough. Let's one sec. On cool. I'm going to try and share the screen again. Let's see if this works. British, there's some echo in my mic. Like, I can hear whatever I'm saying.
Okay. Because this side is fine now. It's much better.
Okay. Let me try again. How is this?
That is good. It's okay.
Cool. Let me try sharing the screen again.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry for the hiccup. Yeah, I'll just try to launch the phone. One second. Cool. So this was where we last left. So we had the, what did I do? Oh, crap. One sec. I quit straightly. One sec. Okay, cool. I'll minimize this and not close it. Cool. So this is where we last left, right? And so now it pretty much looks like what we had earlier, but there's some margin and padding issues. First of all, the value needs to be aligned to the stars. So what we can do here is go into the rating bar. And so row has this property called vertical alignment. Oh, wow, this is still hanging a lot. Cool. So this will take an align dot center vertically, and we'll just simply deploy this and test it, because autocomplete is now not working. No, not this one. Okay, it's an alignment. Cool. So if we try building and running this, Wow, this is being super slow. Okay, anyways, while this builds, we can plan out what we want to do about the list UI. Cool, this is decent enough, right? So this looks fine for now. Now what we want to do is maybe we can like add a little bit of padding for the star items as well. So let's give it a modifier dot padding, and this will take a start padding of 8 dp. Okay, cool. Let's clean this up and deploy this once again. And now, if you look at our popular movies fragment, which is what the list was, right? This is basically using a recycler view right now. So one of the good things about Compose is if you decide on adopting Compose, you don't have to go all in. So it's not like you'll have to migrate your entire app. You can do it incrementally, and it also interops very well with the existing view system. So what we'll do here is basically within this fragment host like a list of composables, right? So first of all, to do that, what we'll need is we need like a recycler view of sorts, and a recycler view equivalent of Compose is called lazy column and lazy row, depending on which direction you want that in. So let's create a new package here. Let's call this screen, and this will be popular movies. Okay. Now this is again going to be a composable, which takes so it will be a popular movies composable. And what we want to do for the recycler view is we want it to directly observe the list that's coming in from the view model. So we'll pass in the view model, which is the popular view model here, right? And now what we can do is we can create a list, and this is the view model's movie. And then there's a special operator within the live data, which is called observe as state. So a couple of things to unpack here, right? First up, so observe as state basically returns like a state wrapped object or a list to you. You can, of course, use an equal to here. But then what that will mean is you can't directly use the movies object because now this is a state of list, right? So you'll have to do a value. So what a by delegation lets us do is it automatically unwraps the movie. So we don't have to do a get value there. So we can directly consume the movie. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to render out a recycler view. So let's create a lazy column. Okay. And lazy column has this property called items, where we can supply our list. Right now, this list, as you can see, is nullable because when the property is initialized initially, the movie might not have loaded. So by default, it will be a nullable. So to be safe in this case, what we can do is supply a default value of an empty list so that this doesn't crash. Okay, cool. Now, why is this complaining? And this should work. One sec. Model.movie.observe as state. Yeah, this is the one. Initial value would be an empty list of movie. Yeah. And then for each of these movies, right, because this is essentially a for loop here, we want to pass this and generate a movie card. So we'll pass the movie here. Required int found any. One sec. Why is this complaining? So this is a lazy column. let's just run this. Probably this is the ID that's going bonkers. Yeah, let's try to run this. So for this, what we want to do is we want to host this inside of the fragment, right? So for doing so, there are a couple of ways in which you can take care of that. One would be you can essentially add a compose view here itself, right? And then do a binding.get compose view and inflate the composable there. But if your entire screen itself is a composable, then instead of doing that, you can just directly return a compose view from here. So to do that, we'll just get rid of the binding, we'll get rid of the adapter, and then we'll get rid of all of this code here for the observation. And instead, what we'll do is we'll return a compose view which takes context, and then from this we invoke the set content method. And our set content basically takes a composable and it renders it out to the screen. Cool. So here we will do a popular movies and we'll pass in the view model. Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, we imported the wrong view model here. So this should be a popular movies view model. And so this will be movies. And now we can pass it an empty list. Cool. Cool. This should work now. Let's run this. Instead of the preview, let's deploy the app. And if everything goes well, you'll see the movie list on the screen. Let's give it a while. Brijesh, if you have questions coming, you can keep them coming to me because building is taking a while. So instead of waiting, we can get those answered.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So we have like the movie list showing up, and the way in which you can tell that this is a composable is if you look at this half-star drawable, it is different from the favorite screen, right? Which is coming natively. Now there's a couple of bugs here, right? One, if you look at like the last item, it's not fully visible. And a second is if you click on any of the items, it's not opening the details screen. So let's fix the card first of all. So right now, if you look at like the box here, right? Or let's say split this, right? This is not at the desired offset. Like the correct one, the XML version is much lower than what we have over here. So to fix that, so box has this property called content alignment. I'll have to give it a comma first. Content alignment, and this will be an alignment dot center start. So if I give this a center start, what it will essentially do is align the item from the center of the available, like center of the space, and then produce the composables from there on. So let's try to run this again. And in the meantime, we can also fix the last item getting cut off from here. Cool. So this looks much better now. So in the lazy column, it takes a property called a content padding. And like if you work with recycler views, you know this is like a pain to do manually. So in this case, what we'll define is we want this padding to be applied only to the bottom so that this last list item can be correctly visible. So we'll just give it like a bottom padding of, let's say, 64 dp, just for demonstration purposes. This will be a content padding, not content. Cool. Let's run this, and that part should also be fixed now. Cool. Yeah, this is totally visible now. Cool. Now what we'll do is we'll plug in this screen to the detail screen by navigating to it. So I'll show you how it currently works. So in the, what's that, favorites movie fragment? Yeah. So what happens is we have the adapter, and we've got a listener on the adapter, which basically passes back a movie that was clicked on, and then we use the nav controller with nav directions to navigate to the details. So this entire setup we can essentially reuse. So for doing that, what we'll do is again open the movie card and first add this lambda there. So this will be a lambda that takes a movie and returns unit, right? And now we want this entire box itself to be clickable. Of course, this will show up now. So what we can do is we can apply a modifier called clickable on this. And whenever this movie is clicked, we basically want to invoke this lambda that we have passed with the movie object, right? Now, we will also have to pass this down. So this will be another lambda here, movie unit, and pass this back down to the card component. And then where we are creating the popular movie screen, we can essentially handle the navigation here. So this is a movie. And so here we can basically do what we did before, which is find nav controller dot navigate. And we have a directions argument here. So it's a popular movies fragment direction, right? Dot action popular movies fragment to movies detail fragment. So if you look at this, this is already defined in my nav graph. So that takes an int ID and goes to the movie detail screen. So we'll pass in the movie dot ID. And now if we run this, this screen will essentially redirect us into the detail screen. Oh yeah, so of course our preview will break now because we'll just pass this an empty lambda. Cool, let's try clicking on this. Cool, this works. So now what we want to do is we'll start building out this detail screen and then later on try to prettify it. So before we get into that, Brijesh, do we have any questions that I can answer up till now?
Yeah, we have few.
Yes.
Let's pull that up. Yeah.
Do we need to maintain all resolution images in drawable folders like in the old way? Good question. I haven't actually tried using static assets yet, but I would guess so because the way in which we handle resources has not changed. So for loading strings, we have the string resource, and I think there's an equivalent image resource. So you'll have to specify that drawable's name, and then the system will take care of picking up the right one. So I guess yes, but for most static assets like icons and stuff, you can use an SVG, and that should take care of the scaling. But for the static images that you ship with your app, you'll probably have to still do it the old way. I'm not entirely sure, but probably you'll still have to do it the old way.
God.
Any image vector you use in the code, is it available in Drawable? Oh, yes. Yeah. So the image component that I'm using here, right? Where is the movie card? Rating item here, right? So this is an icon composable that comes from the material icon class, right? And this image vector is essentially coming, this is basically using like the material icons. And this also comes from the material icons compose library. So this is just a dependency that I have on the material compose components, and I'm basically getting that out of the box. So essentially, it does ship with it.
These are all those default icons that comes.
Yes. So there's like the default. There's the sharp. There's dual tone. I don't remember the naming, but essentially every material icon is available as a named qualifier once you add the Gradle dependency.
Got it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we have few. I'll just quickly show.
Does Compose support Kotlin multi-platform? No, it doesn't. There is JetBrains has taken up the Compose desktop project, so you can essentially use the same knowledge that you gain while learning Compose on Android and build desktop applications. I remember there was a Talking Kotlin episode where they had talked about hopeful future plans of bringing JetBrains Compose to Kotlin native. but that's nowhere in the works right now. So no, this is Android exclusive at the time being.
Okay. Got it.
Cool. I'll take the other questions after building the screen out. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. So now for this screen, again, if you look at it from top to bottom in a layered approach, we have this blurred backdrop sort of a thing going on in the background. Then we have like a card. I think it'll be better if I show this as a light theme. Yeah. Then we have this card, which has all of this content. And then on the top, we have this poster, right? So let's get started building this. Now, since this particular screen does not have any like components to break it out down to, we'll just build it out as a whole screen entirely. So let's create a Kotlin class called movie details. Now this will be a composable. Let me close this out. Yeah, composable fun movie details. And this will take in a movie for now. Let's generate a preview for this, which will again not work, but fun details preview. And it's called movie details. And pass in the fake data factory dot make movie. Cool. So let's think about what we have to do here, right? So first of all, we'll need a box, right? Because again, things are stacked on top of each other. So box, and this box will be match parent on both sides. So modifier dot fill max size. Okay, and we also want the content alignment to be from the top center. Yeah, so content alignment top center basically means that it'll start producing items somewhere roughly from here. Because if you look at this, things are fairly centered here for now, right? Cool. Now, there are three things we want to build here. One is the backdrop. The other is the content. And then the third is that poster on top, which is this image, right? So let's get to it one by one. So if you look at the content, it's simply an image. So we'll just use like a coil image here. And this will be movie dot backdrop URL. And then let's give this a modifier. So modifier dot fill max width, and we'll give it a height of around 300 dp. Let's import the dp. Cool. We also want a couple of more additional properties for this. So we want this image to basically fade in. So coil has this property called fade in. We'll put a true there. And then we also want to add a content scale, which will be a content scale of crop. We want this to be filled entirely. And let's add a content description first so that it stops complaining. Content description will be, I'll give it a movie name itself. Okay. And now to blur the image, Coil has these transformations that we can use. So that go inside of the request builder lambda. So first we'll crossfade this. Actually, since we're fading this, crossfade is not required. So let's just do a transformation here. So transformation has this blur transformation. And what the blur transformation takes is a context and a blur radius. Now we don't have, like in Compose, we don't have a function called get context, right? But each Compose has like a local composition context that you can use to, fetch your resources and do things like these. So that comes from your local context.current. But this will not work because this needs to be invoked from a composable scope, which this is not. So what we'll do is we'll like create a context. That'll be a local context.current. Pass in the context here, and then give it a radius of like 25. So I think that's a radius, right? Yeah, 25f. Cool. Let's see if this shows up. It probably won't show up because network images are not rendered. Cool. So that takes care of the image part, right? Now what we want to do is we want to have the card here, right? Now, if you look at this card, the white card that we have, it's at like a distance from the top, right? And the analogous component for a card in Compose is a surface, right? So for the surface, what we want to do is, first of all, we want to offset it from the top. So let's give it a top padding of 24.dp. Actually, it will be way more than 24 dp. It should be like 250 or something. Yeah, 250 dp. And we then want it to fill the max height. Now, let's give this an elevation because cards need to be at a distance, like an offset from the bottom. So let's give it like an elevation of 8 dp. And then let's trim out the corners to be rounded. So for doing that, we need to give it a shape of a rounded corner. And then here we can specify the rounded, like corner radius for each of the 4 corners. So start will be 24.dp and end will be, top end will be also 24.dp. Let's try to deploy the preview and see if things are okay so far. Cool. So we do get the blurry image, but we are not getting the card. Oh, yeah. So for that, I guess we need like a content first. So let's give it a column where we put in the content, which will be a modifier dot fill max width because we wanted to span the entire width of the parent. And this will also have like a default height, right? So we want to give it a minimum height of, let's say, 650 dp. And the reason why I'm giving it a minimum height is because the summary that you saw earlier for the movies that showed up here, they are of different lengths. So we don't want the card to shrink or extend based off of it. So a minimum height will help offset that. We also want to give this like a top padding. So padding on top because we'll have like a poster here. So we want the content to be unblocked. So let's give it like a 120 dp padding on top. Cool. And for the title, we can simply like copy this text we have and change the property. So we'll have a text, movie title, max lines 1, color we can remove because that will take from the surface modifier itself. Cool. Now we can run this and see if it works. Modifier typo. Cool. So we got the card, we got the text, which is misaligned right now. We can quickly fix that up, right? So what we can do for that is let's give it a vertical arrangement. So we want what we basically want to do is, so if this is the column, we want to start producing item from the top. So let's give it an arrangement dot top and then align everything horizontally. So horizontal alignment would be alignment dot center horizontally. Now if we run this, it should work. Meanwhile, we'll also add the rating bar here that we had earlier created. So passing the movie dot rating. I think this would work now, hopefully. Cool. It does look like it is loading it this time. Okay, cool. So the title shows up and the rating shows up, but the text is white now. And the reason why the text is white is because, okay, cool, this showed up. So yeah, so the reason why the text is white is because we've actually specified the text color itself to be white. But it is a little tricky because if you look at the list, right, let's deploy the actual app. This cannot be correctly themed right now because in the regular list, this has to be white because it's above the images. But inside of here, it needs to be basically theme dependent and be black. So what we'll do is let's pass this color. And the default value would be a color.white. So this will now use the passed color. And then from the detail screen, we can pass it a color of material theme dot colors dot on surface. So on surface will basically determine if the theme is light or dark and assign it the appropriate color here. Cool. Now what we want to do is below the rating bar, we get this, again, a text. So we'll just copy this, paste it below here. Remove the max lines overflow property. This will be a text align dot center, and font will be non-bold. This will be around 18 SP, and then this will get a, so horizontal padding would be 16 dp, and then the vertical padding will be, let's say, 32 dp. So vertical would be 32 dp. Cool. Let's build and refresh this. Again, this will again not work. We can just use this itself for now for reliably getting the previews and just close this off. Cool. So now that we have the content here, what did we do? Oh, so I should pass the overview, right? So now that we have the content on the card, the other two things that are required are the button and then the poster that we had seen on top of it. So let's add those two, right? So this looks fine. First up, we'll add a button. Now, I've already created a basic skeleton of what a button should look like here, which is called add to favorite button, and it takes a movie. So I'll show you what this is right now. But if I run this in the moment, you'll see that it'll be broken. It will not look proper or fully fleshed out. And the reason for that is, so first of all, I've used a column here to center it out at an offset of 32 from the top. So you can see this is an unfilled button. And the reason why this is unfilled is because I have not supplied in the properties, because these properties essentially depend on the movie's state, right? So let's flesh them out one by one. So first of all, if the text, so for the text, we basically want to determine if the movie is favorite or not. So if the movie is favorite, then we want to return a string resource called remove from favorite. So that's r.string. Remove from favorites. I'll just remove this because it's taking up space. Cool. And else, what we want to do is load the string resource called r.string.add to favorite. Cool. Let's format this. Same thing with the icon. So the icon will also take in an icon composable. And the image vector here would be determined by the favorite state. So if the movie is favorite, we want to have a filled heart. So that will be an icons.default.favorite. Else, we want to have icons.default.favorite border. Right? Cool. Content description, let's keep it null, but again, don't follow me on this because this is bad for accessibility. Cool. Now, if we run this, it should show us the fully fleshed out button. And we'll add the on-click property to this later. So cool. You can see that the button is showing up now. And the reason why this is showing up as favorite is because I've hard-coded that value here. So its favorite is true. Cool. Now the last bit here is the poster. So we'll add the poster here, and I've already built like a poster image which takes a movie, and there's nothing fancy. It's just a surface that wraps a coil image and loads it from the URL that I've supplied. So if I run this, you should see the card show up on top. Cool. So this works now. There are two things that we want to do. So first up, we want to wire this together with the movie details fragment, right? So the movie details fragment as essentially passes this. Let me show you details fragment. Yeah. So the movie details fragment basically passes it an argument from the navigation args, right? So this contains an int ID that it uses to basically get the movie from the repository, right? And then it basically observes that movie and renders it out. So what we will do is we'll remove all of this render code from here. We'll also remove the binding and inflating of this XML. Now, let's return a compose view and pass in the context. Set a content here and pass in the movie details. Now, this is right now expecting a movie. So first of all, let's change that. So this will now get a movie ID, which will be an int, and we'll also give it a view model. So view model would be movie details view model, because we want to load it here in this composable. So let's go in here, and the ID will be available from the args, and this is navigation args that I'm using here. And then I'll simply pass in the view model here. Cool. Now, to load this, because now everything here is expecting the movie, first of all, what we need to do is call view model dot get movie details and pass in the movie ID so that it can initiate the trigger loading. The next thing is we need a movie from the view model as a state. So view model dot movie dot observe as state. Now the problem here is that this is not a list, so we can't provide it like a default value, right? So if you simply go ahead and double bang every movie occurrence, this will cause a crash because initially this will be null. So what we can do is, first up, let's clean this screen out, right? So we've got like 3 different distinct components here that are just all piled up against each other. So we can cut this out, create a backdrop component that takes a movie, create a composable, and this will be a non-null movie, and paste this here. So that takes care of the header. Similarly, what we'll do is we'll cut everything here out and create like a movie details content that will also take a movie, and let's create the composable again, and this will be a non-null. Pass this back in. Cool. Now what we want to do is, this is fairly clean for now. We basically want to render all of these out only if the movie is not null. So there are 2 ways you can go about it. One, you do a movie check here. Movie is not equal to null. Sorry, if a movie is null, you basically return from here. So don't compose anything. Right? So what this will do is, this, as soon as this hits here and the initial value is null, this will not compose. Once this gets a value, it will start composing. But then for that, we will have to again double bang everything, which will still work, but I really like that's not a clean looking piece of code there. So what we'll do is just wrap it inside of a let call. So movie.let, and then all of these would go inside here. And now instead of passing the movie, we'll just pass the implicit it parameter here. Cool. Okay, let's run this and see if things work as expected. The details Details. Okay, so the preview will no longer work because we require a view model. So we'll just remove that. The button will still not work because we've not hooked it up to with a click listener. But let's see if the UI looks fine. Cool. Cool. Let's load one of the movies from here. Okay. And there was one thing I noticed, which is if you look at this button, right? This is taking up, like, this is not actually taking up this entire desired height. And the reason is because the height is static in this case. So we want this screen to be scrollable. So in order to do that, we will go to the root component, which is a box, and add a vertical scroll property and call this remember scroll state. So now if we run this particular movie should at least look fine. Cool. Yeah, this loads. Now what we want to do is we want to actually wire up the button, right? Again, so we have the view model instance, and if you look at the view model has a set and unset property that function that marks a movie as favorite and resets it. So what we can do is we can take the view model and just pass it to the details content, and then the details content can just pass it down to the add favorites button. But then if you look at this composable, right, this doesn't really care or have to know about the view model, right? This should only be aware about like a lambda that will trigger when you click the button, and then we can handle it from the root composable itself, because that will make for a much nicer pattern. So we will call this an on favorite button click, which will be a lambda that takes a movie and then returns unit. And then on click here, we'll just invoke that lambda. So on favorite button click with the movie. Cool. Now what we want to do is I'll just copy this part, and then here on this particular component, we'll add this again and pass this down. Cool. Now what happens here is we get a trailing lambda. So let's call this movie. Now, if the movie is favorite, we want to unset it as favorite. So view model dot unset movie as favorite, pass in the movie ID. Movie.id, else we will mark it as favorite. View model dot set movie as favorite, movie.id. Cool. So if we run this, now the favorite functionality should also essentially work. So let's go to Godzilla, remove this from favorites. Let's go to Cherry, remove this from favorites. Did this work? Yeah. Cool. Remove. Let's add something. Let's add Godzilla back. Cool. So this works now. But it isn't particularly exciting, right? I mean, this is just straightforward stuff that we've retrofitted together to make it work. So for the next part of the talk, what I want to focus on is, okay, I think I quit a keynote. What I want to focus on is actually making this look nicer. So I have like a couple of slides around theming here that I'll just quickly run past. Cool. Let me know if you can see the slides.
Yeah, it was.
Cool. So we've built like the first part of it, but now let's focus on actually making it look nice. So the detail screen, this is what we want it to look like. And we'll also add like a cast section to it, right? So material theming on Compose basically depends on two things. One, your color palette, and two, your typographic scale, right? So for the colors, what I went and did was just go to this material resource called the color tool, and then you can pick a primary and a secondary color, and it'll generate the palette for you. So you can see I've got the primary and secondary swatches here. And for the type scale, I also like built this one out specifically for myself because this is what I wanted this to look like, right? So this was like the prep work to actually get theming to work. But how does theming actually work in Compose? So for that, we'll take a look at building our theme out and then assigning the theme to our UI. So if you look at the files, I've got two files here. So one is called colors. And what this is essentially doing is taking those same hex codes, the first 4 characters in this case is for the alpha value. It's taking those same hex codes and generating like a primary color, primary dark color, secondary, and secondary dark color. Now, like the convention is typically to name it as per the shade, like primary 700, primary 500 for the lighter one. But I think naming it semantically makes more sense, and that's how I prefer seeing the colors in. So that's why I've named it this way. And then once you've generated your swatches, you generate 2 arrays. One is, or 2 variations. One is called a light color, and then you pass in the primary variant, secondary, and secondary variant. And similarly for the dark colors, you pass in the primary, secondary, and basically this colors function takes a bunch more properties, right? So if you don't want to leave this to the default, you can specify those in here as well. And you can see I've like specified like a background property, right? Now, same with the typography. So I think I have the type file, yeah? So for types, I already have a lot of the Google fonts loaded for me. So in this project, I have like, 5 fonts. So one is Chivo Bold, Regular, and then Rubik Bold, Rubik 1, and Rubik Regular, right? I'll close all of these off, and let's go into the type here. So if you look at the type here, what you basically do is create font families. So we have 2 categories or 2 families of font, which is Chivo and Rubik. So I've created a Rubik family, which is like a font Rubik with the asset Rubik Regular and font weight normal. And then we have a Rubik Bold with weight bold and extra bold, and similarly with Chivo. Now, when you create your typographic scale, right? So this is going to include all of your H1, H2, subtitle, body, and so on and so forth. You can create a text style, specify the font size, then specify the family that it wants to be, that it needs to be picked from. And then depending on what weight you select, that's the font you'll get. So take, for example, this H4 scale. So I've specified the family Rubik, right? And then I've told it to pick the extra bold font. So it'll pick up Rubik 1 and give it a 36 SP size and a letter spacing of -8. Similarly, for H5, I've used Chivo and I've given it a bold weight. So it'll pick up the Chivo font and give it like a 24 SP. And so on and so forth for the other style. Now, this was a lot of, manual repetitive work. That's why I did it beforehand, but I'll show you how to build the theme out from scratch. So we'll create a new composable called cinematic theme, because that's the name of the app. So this will again be a composable called the cinematic theme. And now what this will take is like a content composable, right? So this will basically apply the theme on composable. So this needs a parameter, which will be a content, which is of type composable function. And this will emit a unit. Next, we will use the material theme builder here. So we'll pass in the colors. So based on whether our system theme is dark or light, we want to use the relevant color. So if is system in dark theme, which is basically a utility function that comes from the foundation class. So if the theme is dark, we want to load the dark colors. So let's call it dark colors. Else we want to load the light colors. Okay. Now let's specify the typography. So typography is equal to typography. And again, if you look at this, it is back reference from the type scale that we had created, right? And what we'll do is we'll use these two and apply it to the content that we have passed. So comma, content is equal to content. And we can remove this here. Now we've created a theme, but this will not work out of the box like you would have in the XML, where you just apply a theme to, apply a theme via a manifest and you'll start working. You'll have to basically assign each screen its own theme. So let's start off with the popular movies fragment where we've hosted the list, right? So we also want these stylings to work on this particular movie card component. So what we'll do is set content, right? So before set content, we want to wrap this with the theme that we created. So we'll pass in the cinematic theme and paste everything back here. Now, similarly, with the movie details fragment, we'll do the same thing, which is wrap this behind the cinematic theme and put this up. Cool. Now, if I run this, the theme will not just magically get applied on all of these composables. We'll have to do a little bit of work. But what you can still notice is, at least like if I go into the details screen and if I turn on dark mode, the surface color and everything works fine, right? So let's now start applying the typographic scales to our different composables here. So we'll open the movie card. Cool. So first up, what we want to do is style this rating bar text. Okay. So for the rating bar, we will have, I think the styling would be material H4. So first, let's remove the font weight and the font size and give it a style. And the styling will be material theme.typography. And I'll just copy it onto my clipboard because we'll be using it a lot, .h4. And if I run this, the rating text should at least be changed. Cool. And you can see my H4 definition here is a Rubik 1, which is this font. Okay, cool. So let's apply it to the other components now. So for the text here, again, remove the font weight and font size and give this, I think this will be a H6 because this is lower than the cut. So this will be style equal to .h6. And then for my movie info, this will be a subtitle font. So remove this and then give it a style is equal to .subtitle. Cool. Let's run this and see. Cool. Looks good. We can probably do with some padding here, but let's try and fix that. So movie card. This is the movie info. Let's add some padding for this. So modifier is equal to modifier dot padding. Up is equal to 8 dp. And now while this runs, let's go into the details card and modify those. So again, for the text here or the title, we'll still use the same H6 if I'm not wrong. So remove this from here. Apply a style is equal to H6. Yeah, and then this should get a body style. So style dot body 1. Let's run. Okay, let's run this now. Expecting an element. I just fixed that. Let's open a movie. Cool. So in order to style it according to the design I had shown you earlier, we need to make a couple of changes here. So this will be aligned to the start now. And then we also had like a section header here. So I've already created that component, which is again just a text view. Sorry, a text composable, and I'll pass in the overview. I'll just show you what this looks like. So if you go into the section header, this is just a text with a text alignment of start and using the subtitle property. So this is what this looks like. And we can probably change this to start and top because we don't need that the bottom padding, which was unintentionally applied. Cool. For the final bit, we will add like a cast row for this screen. So if you look at the view model here, the view model has a cast property, which gets like the cast details from the API and then emits it into this live data. So first up, let's also fetch the cast from the API, and then we'll observe the cast as a state. So cast, and since this is a list of casts, we can pass it an empty list. Empty list. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to show the cast before the button. So if you look at the content here, this is where we want to show the cast. So first, let's add a section header, call it cast. And then what this will do is this will build a cast row using the cast that we have. Now we will need to pass the cast to it. So let's do a cast, which is a list of cast. And then this will also need to be passed from here. So cool. Let's go back. And let's build this composable out now. So this will be stuff cast. Cool. So what this will do is this is also going to be like a horizontal recycler view itself, right? So we saw a lazy column, right? Now we will see a lazy row. Now lazy column and lazy row don't really have any difference as such. It's mostly around the orientation. Okay, so what we will do is we want to we don't want to have any padding here, or do we? So I think it'll probably take some padding later on. Anyways, so what we will do is we'll just loop through this list. So items and pass it cast, and for each of these cast objects, we will create a cast item. So this will be a cast item that takes it. Now this is not created right now, so let's just create a composable function. Required int found. One sec. Am I observing the correct thing here? Cast is in fact a list. I am passing that down as a cast list, and then we have a cast row here. Probably something off. Oh yeah, we were using a different variation. So we'll just pass in a cast, and then create a cast item, which takes not an int, it will take a cast. Right. So now what we want to do is we want to have like a circular image for the cast item, right? So what we will do here is just use the coil image property and then give this a modifier. So let's give it some padding first. Where did it go? Here, right? So modifier.padding, and we want it to have like a start padding of around 24 dp. And then this image size, let's keep it 60 dp, right? And then what we want to do is we want to, okay, this is the request, so this will be a modifier instead. Yeah. And then we want to pass in the data. So data will be cast.poster URL, and then we want to use a request builder to crossfade this in true. And we also want to have a transformation called the circle crop transformation. That circle crop transformation. And what the circle crop transformation does is it takes an image, makes it round. That's it. Cool. Let's give this a content description as well. So request builder ends here. We can give this a content description, which will be the cast name. And that's it. Let's try to run this and see if this works. Hopefully it should. Cool. And as you can see, the cast load, we can probably give it some padding because it's hugging the section header at this point. So cast row, give it some content padding. Again, Studio is acting up. Content padding is equal to padding value. Top, let's say 16 dB. And let's run this for the final time. And yep, this looks much better now. We can probably do one last thing here, which is make the images fade in, because right now if there is no image, it just looks like a blank screen there. Cool, let's open this up. Yep, this is looking good. Soul. Awesome, cool. So that's it for the app. As you could see, like, I took an existing view-based application and simply converted it to use Compose. It took me about like 1.5 to 2 hours, but depending on the scale of your application, this might take a little longer. You will also have to invest some time in state modeling within your view model and taking care of things like theming. If you look at the colors and the typography particularly, this is probably very common in how designers do a handoff. So whenever they build like a design system, you can expect this as a spec here. And so what you can essentially do is use this spec to map out your typographic scale and then build out your individual smaller components out. Now, this was not an ideal approach by any means. Like, I could have very well created, specific text components itself with the different and correct stylings applied to it, and broken down the screens into much more smaller components. But I wanted to just highlight how approachable Compose is and how easy it is to get started once you get the hang of the basic nuances. So that being said, I'm open for any questions that you might have now.
Yeah.
Brijesh?
Yeah, I'm here. Great talk, Prateek.
Cool.
Like, it was cool to have even the dark theme also demoed, so that when people adopt to it, aware like the power of like how things get easier with Compose.
Yep.
Great, man.
So I'll just remove this and start up the video again. Yeah, cool.
Great.
Any questions that you might have?
Yes. Let me just look at the comments areas.
Is Jetpack Compose support hot reload, hot restart? If you're comparing it with Flutter, no. They had talked about improving the tooling. Like, you could see, like, the tooling is still not perfect and it still hangs. The autocomplete is not as good, but they are working on polishing things up with the with, I think, the new IR backend in the Kotlin compiler. Things should get a little more faster alongside Kotlin symbol processing. So that was one of the things that they have on the cards and they are investing in, but right now it's not as good as Flutter or React for that matter. Yeah.
Sure.
We can apply Jetpack pagination. Yes. So any architecture component library or Jetpack library or anything that comes from the regular view system, as long as you know how to make the data consumption work with Compose, it'll just work out of the box. You don't have to worry about anything else. The interop story is, I think, the most important part. I don't think for the near future, people are just going to scrap off what they have and just start integrating Compose from scratch. So it was kind of important for me to show that with the existing fragment and activity setup, you can still integrate Compose within it, right? I could have like gone full blown on this and scrapped off everything, built out the navigation structure itself with Compose, but that's like a lot more work. And navigation in itself right now in Compose is not that stable, but it should work. Like any legacy thing that you have or any Jetpack library that you're using, you should be able to make it usable with Compose, unless there's like a strict restriction as such.
Sure. So similar lines, we know there's one more question.
Is Jetpack's life cycle, is Compose life cycle aware? The reason why I removed those is because the Compose view is just like a regular view that plugs into a composable. So that Compose view is still restricted by the life cycle of its parent, which is the fragment. Compose, I think I had read, it still has life cycles, but you don't have to take care of it. It's, I think, on active, on dispose, and on commit. You don't have to worry about these. State management is pretty good in composables. One of the things that I did not cover in this talk was composable scope specific memory with things like remember. So you can essentially remember the state of a particular compose widget, right? So in case the orientation changes, you won't end up in like a Borg state where you had like an edit text with a lot of data and then all of that data goes away. So you can do a hierarchy specific or a compose node specific remember there, and just remember the state of that particular widget to re-render it out in that particular state back when the orientation or configuration changes. On migration, should we keep the fragment or just use single activity with multiple compose components? That totally depends on your use case. If you have a project right now which uses fragments and you want to build a new feature out in Compose, you can just plug that fragment with the composable using Compose view. You can also set it directly in the activity. Activities come with that set content extension that you can use. Or if you want to like take that risk and move all into Compose, you can use that as well. It does provide you the flexibility of having a lot of options. So see what works for you. Components defining is internally using constraint layout. I don't understand. If you're talking about layout, Compose does have a version of constraint layout to handle complex layout. So the screen, the detail screen I showed you in the XML version, I had used constraint layout for it. And Compose does have support for constraint layout, but I wanted to cover the primitives here, the box and rows and columns to build screens out to show that things are still possible with it. Of course, Compose comes with constraint layout, so you can transfer that learning there. The APIs are slightly different in terms of defining constraint, but internally, no, it doesn't use constraint layout internally to lay things out. It depends totally on your modifiers and what parent it belongs to for laying things out.
Couple of more questions.
Yep. How to handle landscape view using Compose, as sometimes we can have landscape view different from portrait. You can have, I mean, if you want to have like a totally different variation, you can have like a different composable altogether, and you can just check the configuration of the screen and invoke that composable instead. Or in most cases, you can just play around with the modifiers and adjust them to work with the landscape view. So think about like this screen that I showed you, the detail screen. If this was not vertically scrollable, and if I change the orientation and I want this to be scrollable, I can just apply the vertical scroll modifier there. So it's almost similar to how we take care of it right now in the view system. If you want to have like a totally different layout file, as you create in the current system, you can always do like a different composable altogether. But you can also adjust the existing layout itself to work with the landscape layout.
So if at all it's a different view, then in onCreate you check the configuration and then call out the different composable functions.
Yeah, I have not, to be honest, I have not actually worked with landscape layouts yet, but it should be possible. Like Compose does offer a lot of checks. Like, you saw the dark theme check. There are ambience similar to that where you can check the configuration and depending on that, render things out differently. So it should be possible. It shouldn't be that difficult actually. How can we add, remove, update modifiers dynamically after UI is drawn? Say text size value is dependent on API response. Would there be any UI performance implication on low-end devices? Good question. So if your text size is dependent on like a data source, so as you saw, there was like a text composable where I was defining the size, right? As long as you render it out, or sorry, as long as you convert the response into the size it expects, I think it's a text unit, right? And you convert that into an SP, it should be fine. Like just observe your data source, get the result from it, and convert it to an SP, and it should take it just fine. As far as the UI performance is concerned, so if your data source changes, it's not like the entire screen will be redrawn. So what it will do is it'll take a look at the node and it'll see which part of that state is being observed by which node. And let's say if there are three different things in that state and only one has changed and only one particular compose node is accessing that, so all the three won't be updated. It's only that one that will be reinvoked and redrawn. So performance is taken care of for you internally, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's a wrap. That's all we had
Cool.
for questions.
Thanks for having me, Brijesh. This was good. Sorry for the studio issues early on, but I think this was fun. Yeah.
That was fine. Like technical issues can come, but like super useful talk. It was nice to have built slowly, and like we saw all the like listing and detail everything with the dark theme coming up in like 1 hour time, and you answered all.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And yeah, if you have any more questions, just feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I will share these slides and the project later on Twitter itself.
Cool. We'll read his talk so you can see his handle and you can contact him for any composite and doubts.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for joining. I hope you learned like a few bits about Compose, and do check it out. It's gonna be the next big thing in writing UI. So that's it from our side. We can sign off now. Thanks everyone.